First off, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we gather on today. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, traditions, culture and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across this great nation. I extend my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community. I acknowledge their history of wisdom, resilience and survival, and respectively thank them for their contribution to the life of the city and this region. So welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting of the 22nd of February 2023. I declare this meeting open at 10 a.m. I would like to advise meeting attendees that this meeting is being webcast and audio recorded. So we'll go straight into reflection. Can the gallery please be upstanding if you can and join with me? They say good things come to those who wait. I feel like the City of Logan has done its fair share of waiting, and at times it can be hard to watch our city be overlooked. So on Friday, I was delighted to hear the news on that a brand new venue will be built in the City of Logan as part of the Olympics funding deal. With the biggest sporting event in the world, the Olympics and Paralympic Games are on our doorsteps. It's hard not to get caught up in the excitement and the energy in the lead up to 2032. I've made no secret of my desire to secure an Olympic venue for Logan's growing community. And since the announcement, I've been working hard behind the scenes to ensure that the Deputy Premier and Logan state and federal members were well aware of this. As a council, we knew we couldn't sit idle, and last August we moved forward to develop a roadmap to identify opportunities and significant legacy and infrastructure wins for the city. At the time, we also asked the state government to meet council halfway and contribute to a venue feasibility study and business case for a multifunctional venue in Logan Central. I want to acknowledge our local state and federal members who have been campaigning on behalf of our city and supported council's vision to make 2032 a reality for our city. While it is early days, there is still a lot of work to be done. I know I'm looking forward to seeing this come to fruition on the road to 2032. Thank you. I note that Councillor Bradley is on a leave of absence for today's meeting. Do any other councillors have a leave of absence to declare? I don't believe so. Is there a mover for the motion as displayed on the screen? Councillor Murphy has moved the motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Russell has seconded the motion. Do any councillors wish to speak to the motion? I wouldn't imagine so. I now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That has been carried unanimously, therefore the motion's been carried. Condolences, I now refer to condolences. Do any councillors have a condolence to raise? I do know there is condolences, so we'll start at Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. Over the last couple of weeks, we've lost several of our local residents with more than 100 years of living, loving and laughing in Logan. And I just want to express condolences. So Marion Durges warmly welcomed me when I was elected as a councillor. She would offer me a cup of tea and a homemade treat and tell me what was going on in Garfield Road. Now, Marion and Kevin married and moved into Garfield Road in the late 60s, and they were there when the tennis courts were still there. Yes, Woodridge had tennis courts. And they actually raised their family there and great contributors to the local community. Marion passed away suddenly. She was in hospital and she was expected to come home, but she did pass away suddenly. So please pass along our condolences to Kevin, her husband, Kevin Durges. The second one is John Jeffs. John and Patricia Jeffs lived in Stubbs Road for more than 56 years. They were married for that same period of time and raised a beautiful family and contributed greatly to the community. John passed away after a long illness and he will be sorely missed in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Russell, Councillor Karansky, Councillor Raven. Councillor Hall, no, and no. That's it. Okay. We now observe a moment of reflection in honour of those who have been gone before us and in support of those who have been left behind. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. I now open the floor for congratulation requests. Do any councillors have a congratulation request to raise? Councillor Lane, and we'll work our way around.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. There is so much to congratulate in my local area because people are really passionate about what they do and how they live their lives. On Monday evening, we celebrated Zomi National Day, which is Zomi Nam Ni. And what it is, it's a community that's actually celebrating the 75th Day of Independence in their home country. There was several hundred people got together in Councillor Mindy's area and a wonderful display of culture, food and dance, and certainly they invited other communities in to help celebrate. So we had Samoan dancers, African dancers, and it was just a great evening. The second thing was Africare. Mr Mayor, Africare operates up in Blackwood Road and they have a seniors program that allows socially isolated people from called backgrounds to actually come in and do exercise and lead a healthy and active lifestyle. And that program is being run as part of the Metro South Health Network, and it's funded through the state government, and it's a wonderful program where people do chair yoga and a range of other activities, but most of all it brings them out of isolation and brings them together. The smiles on the faces of the people at that event was absolutely amazing and they're astoundingly beautiful. The last congratulations goes out to my local school leaders. I attended several school leader events and my goodness, there are some amazing young people there. At Woodridge State High School, we had a young student from last year who received an ATAR score of 91 and is going on to do mathematics at university, and celebrating those achievements in the community is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to share, this was a few weeks ago, so it feels like quite a while ago now, but it was only a few weeks ago. There was a young man in Daisy Hill who had gone missing. I don't know the details of it, but a 14-year-old boy couldn't be found. And so I learned about this I was just sitting at home and my son and I heard there was a helicopter flying over and doing like a loudspeaker over, encouraging the community to keep an eye out for this young man. And so admittedly, I couldn't really understand what the helicopter was saying, but I jumped onto Facebook and was amazed to find how the Daisy Hill community really all came together to try and find this young boy, which did end up happening. But what really was incredible was people were so quickly in Daisy Hill, they were encouraging one another to get out into their yards and to keep an eye out. And people coordinated so quickly, saying, you know, I'll be looking down this street, and everybody getting together to make sure that everywhere was searched. And yeah, so the young man was found that day, and I don't know any other further details about his situation, but it was just incredible to see the community come together.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Who do we congratulate? I mean, Councillor Russell, sorry. Who do we congratulate? Who do you want us to send the congratulations to?
Yes, it would be very expensive to email or to send a letter to everyone in Daisy Hill. I've discussed with the meeting team that this isn't necessarily one where a letter needs to be sent out, but I just wanted to
You just want to acknowledge it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kerensky, Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This weekend just gone, we have the 75th Chin National Day celebrations, and that was hosted by the Chin Community Council of Queensland. This is the first time that the new chairperson has hosted this event, and getting the Chin community, which makes up, in Logan, makes up 7 different tribes, to bring them together is a challenge because they speak different languages, and while they have similar experiences because they all fought for their freedom and celebrated on the same day, just like the Zomi do, who is one of the other tribes from the Chin Nation, bringing them together as 7 unique cultures to celebrate is no small feat. And they did it this year at Marsden State High in the Performing Arts Centre, so new venue, new chairperson, and I tell you, his name's Lal Ram. He was very nervous, but the day was a roaring success. We had hundreds of people all celebrating their culture, their freedom, and also celebrating that they're here in Australia where they can express their faith and they have their democratic rights protected, which was amazing. So I just wanted to congratulate Lal and the entire committee for doing such a fantastic job.
That will be done. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to congratulate Mr Ian Matthew Menny and Mrs Mavis Isabel Menny of Bethania on a successful 70 years of marriage, which was celebrated on the 14th of February. They have 3 children and 17 grandchildren, and get this, Mr Mayor, they met in the Royal Australian Navy. So if you're not having much luck on Tinder or the dating apps, perhaps give our armed services a try. You will protect the country and you might find some love. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser, Councillor Jeremiah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise today to extend congratulations to everyone involved in the recent Parkridge mural opening. The mural was unveiled at the iconic Parkridge Water Tower on Saturday the 11th of February. It's a beautiful and vibrant addition to our community, and it marks the 50th anniversary since the water tower was built. The brand new mural is a work of art that pays tribute to our local Anzac history and serves as a reminder of the sacrifices that were made by our brave servicemen and women. Parkridge played an important role in Australia's military history during World War II, and at the time, our area was home to several airfields that were strategically located and played a critical role in supporting the Allied forces during the Pacific Theatre. The opening of the Parkridge mural was a truly special event, and it was heartening to see the strong community turnout. It was a moment of pride and celebration for artists Lang Rayner and Paul Turnbull. The ribbon cutting ceremony was made all the more special by the artists and their children being the ones who had the honour of cutting the opening ribbon. Adding to the atmosphere of the opening was the live Australian music played by young local musicians Nate and Jasmine. I'd like to make a special thanks to Bert Van Manen MP, Federal Member for Ford, Indigenous Leader Auntie Betty, Andrew Lyon, Jackie Hill, Tegan Madden, Tony and the Logan West SES, Paul Jackson from Parkridge Connect, Ali Strachan, Louise Wheatley and Jimmy Watts from Assorted Grains for making the day such a special event. On behalf of the community, I'd like to express sincere gratitude for your support and your contribution to this important project. Mr Mayor, I also stand today to extend congratulations to Rowena O'Grady for her selfless volunteer work in Parkridge. Rowena's volunteerism in organising regular community meetings at Claremont Resort has not gone unnoticed. These meetings have enabled government and the community to work together to tackle some important local issues. Her ability to bring people from all walks of life together and encourage them to work as a team to tackle some common goals is truly inspiring. These efforts have helped build a stronger sense of community in Parkridge, and Rowena's willingness to give up time and energy to help others is a testament to her selflessness and compassion. On behalf of the community, I'd like to express congratulations for all that Rowena has done in our area. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
That will be done. Councillor Jeremiah. Councillor Stemp. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to pass my congratulations on to David and Vicky Wright. They've recently celebrated 30 years of marriage living in Greenbank. David and Vicky are very entrenched in the local community with the local soccer club. David is also a volunteer at the Greenbank Rural Fire, same with one of his sons as well. So they all still live in Greenbank. They're very well known to all of the locals, also owning a local DMV electrical, so everyone knows who they are, doing work around all of the area. So congratulations to you guys. 30 years of marriage is nothing short of fantastic. And I'd also just like to congratulate actually all of the schools in the City of Logan. I think they've all been going through leadership ceremonies and leadership inductions. So congratulations to all of the kids that have recently been appointed to those positions and that sort of thing. And best of luck to all of them. It is a daunting task for all of them to go through, being voted in by their peers and their teachers. So good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. No, Councillor Murphy. Okay, so we've got the confirmation of the minutes. I now refer to the minutes of the previous ordinary council meeting. I move that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 25th of January 2023 be confirmed. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hall, the seconder of the motion. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? No. I now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That has been carried unanimously, I think, Councillor. Yep, carried unanimously. Therefore, the motion's been carried. Now, councillors, I now refer to the declaration of conflicts of interest. Do any councillors wish to declare any new conflicts of interest against any items on today's agenda, including any conflicts which have subsequently arisen from matters discussed at committee? No. Okay, there being none, I'll now refer to the next item on the agenda, which is a business arising. We have no business arising from the minutes to consider, so we'll go straight into the committee reports. I now refer to the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting held on the 14th of February 2023. Councillor Raven, Chairperson of City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee, you may proceed. So this is just a remainder of the report, and we're doing the other one later. So, Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to note that item 5.1 from this committee will be addressed later today in today's agenda, as it was deferred for this meeting for further consideration and discussion. There was only one other item in the report, Mr Mayor. I'll speak to that now, and it was the repealing of an old policy that was out of date and didn't reflect modern decision-making practices that we've now developed in council. So it's great to see the organisation tidying up these old policies so that we can be as efficient as possible.
Okay, you finished? Okay, councillors, anyone else wish to discuss that committee item? No, I'll hand it back to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I now move that 1, the minutes of the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting held on the 14th of February 2023 be confirmed, and that 2, the recommendations of the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting held on the 14th of February 2023 be adopted.
Okay. So Councillor Raven has moved the motion. Do I have a seconder? That has been seconded by Councillor Stemp. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That has been carried unanimously. Therefore, the motion's been carried. Now, I'll pass it back to you, Mr Raven, to do the point call.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. At the meeting of the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting held on the 14th of February, it was decided to defer item 5.1 to this meeting. To commence discussion on this point, I would now like to move that the original offer's recommendation from the report as follows: that the development application COM 22-2019/1 for a preliminary approval for material change of use to vary the effects of the Logan Planning Scheme 2015 variation request at 257 to 354 and 343 to 399 Green Road, Heritage Park, be approved, subject to the conditions detailed in attachment 4, proposed development conditions.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. What I might do now is I'll ask the officers to come forward to be present for any questions that may be raised during this discussion. So Councillor Raven has moved the motion as displayed on the screen. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lane has seconded the motion. Now we'll go into discussing the motion. So do any councillors wish to discuss this motion? So I will go to Councillor Heremiah first and then Councillor Fraser second.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise today to oppose this development application. This development proposes to reduce the size of a biodiversity corridor, rezone environmental land and allow housing to be built in its place. The development will be on a property that's zoned environmental and is adjacent to nearby residents. These residents have a reasonable expectation that their neighbouring environmentally zoned land will be used for environmental purposes. Approving this development would violate that expectation. This development application does not align with the town plan, and I believe it does not align with what the community thinks is appropriate. Residents know that any decision to rezone environmental land should be made with a thorough understanding of its ecological value. We've got the ecologist report commissioned by the developer, but we don't have our own ecologist report commissioned by council. If we prioritise protecting the natural environment and meeting the reasonable expectations of residents, our city can have sustainable and responsible development that benefits the community. This development isn't that. I believe that rezoning this environmental land for more development is not in the best interests of our community. It's not good enough. It's not good enough for Carver's Reach, it's not good enough for Parkridge, and it's not good enough for our city. I'm against this development application, and I don't believe that it should be approved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Normally I would go into rules of debate because Councillor Hare and I spoke against it, but I believe in fairness here and the ability to give every councillor a say on this, because it's quite an important topic, and I don't want to stymie discussion on this. So what I'll now do is ask Councillor Fraser if he wishes to talk on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, all we have before us is a decision that will determine many aspects of a community's subjective and objective livability of their housing estate. The application before us is asking us to approve a change of use in an area zoned for environmental purposes to a mixed environment and residential zone. This, however, is not being taken lightly by any of us, as there are many factors to scrutinise. The primary focus should be the community's expectations about this matter. I know that the community does not expect an area zoned for environmental purposes to be changed by any of their elected representatives, especially the council representatives. There are, however, some limited circumstances when this zoning could be changed, especially when two higher levels of government have approved the proposed development because of the new study and the many scientifically compelling reasons it outlines. The state and federal governments employ passionate experts to scrutinise any proposed changes to environmental zones. They often reject applications to change environmental zones to other zones. Now, allow me to unpack why the new study is robust. The study was conducted by a consultant. This usually does ring alarm bells as the process is not fully understood by some residents. A developer also commissioned the studies. However, developers work in partnership with council to deliver much needed land for housing for our community. And in many cases, they provide services that nobody else does. The main factor to keep front of mind is the study that justifies the change of zoning was peer-reviewed. Peer reviewing is the assessment of scientific, academic or professional pieces of work by others working in the same field of study. This means that people that are experts in a certain field are scrutinising every aspect of the study to ensure the methodology, assumptions and results are robust. The study has no issues in the peer review process. When I studied psychology at university, any journal article that I intended to read and use as a reference for any assignment was not really worth the paper it was printed on unless it was peer reviewed and therefore not usable in my assessment. Another factor that should instill confidence in the peer reviewing process is as follows. If an expert conducts a study and the study is found during peer review or even later on to be falsified, the career of that expert is ruined. I highly doubt anyone would aim to study for many years and establish a career to suddenly lose all credibility by making one deliberate and foolish decision. I believe all experts in a field of study are passionate about their particular field of study. Any environmental expert would likely be passionate about ecosystems and conserving the environment. They would not conduct a study or review a study and say it stacks up unless it actually does. Considering everything I've spoken to, I do with a very heavy heart have to support the development proposal, as there is new information in the current study that supports this current proposal. Additionally, some of the conditions imposed on the developer do open up areas for community use, which provides better use of the portion of land in question that we'll ever see as it is at present. Finally, I know the divisional councillor is fighting for his community. The community have made it clear their expectations of the land remains as is, and I applaud Councillor Jeremiah for his advocacy. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Well spoken, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Kerensky.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And Mr Mayor, thank you for providing councillors with the latitude to speak. We haven't always been afforded that luxury in the past, so I greatly value that. Today I want to speak to the development. I have no doubt that our friends at Point Corp are actually a very strong economic driver for this city, and that any development that they champion will be of a quality standard. But that isn't my job as an area councillor. My job as a councillor is to determine whether this is a good use of the land parcel that's in question. And I went out to the site myself yesterday. I was familiar with the site, but I wanted to ground truth the information that I'd read in the report. And my observations are that it is a very, very heavily treed site. And that site provides a buffer between the industrial precinct and residential properties in the area. I respect that Point Corp are looking at developing a section of that site for housing and retaining a section of that site for ecological value. But when we went out in 2015 and we asked the community what they wanted of their local planning scheme, they told us that they wanted us to preserve environmental corridors. And we did that, and we wrote that into our scheme. So whilst I respect that the officers are duly diligent in providing offsets for this particular development, I don't believe it meets the community expectation, and I can't support it today. I don't work for the developers of Logan. I work for the community, and the community have spoken. I do have a couple of questions, though, that I would like to ask the officers with your latitude, Mr Mayor. Thank you. Through the Mayor, can the proposed development, David, be conditioned to comply with the existing planning scheme? Because if it can, then my position might change.
Through the Mayor, the application as recommended by officers cannot be conditioned to comply with the planning scheme.
Thanks, Adam. Why is that? The premise of the question was if council was going to vote against it, could it be conditioned to comply? And my answer is no to that question. So what I was driving there is, so in what way would this development not comply? I just am keen for the public to be aware why it will not comply with the planning scheme.
In terms of compliance with the planning scheme, the underlying zone is environmental, as highlighted by councillors, and there is a biodiversity corridor on the site, also as highlighted by councillors. They are included in the 2015 planning scheme. The new information which has been provided as part of this development application seeks to ground truth the areas of remnant endangered vegetation, which is protected at a state and federal level. So it aims to further refine the environmental values of the site. And on that basis, council officers have recommended approval of part of this application proceeding to residential development.
And my understanding is that there's different local, state and federal legislation of interest over the site in terms of ecological value. So I imagine federal government are interested in koalas and the like. Local council would have had a different area of interest. Is that right?
Through the Mayor, that's correct. There are matters of federal, state and local environmental significance on this site.
Great. So when we went out and we asked the community what they wanted from their council, the community told us that they wanted to preserve this ecological site, and that is local council's job, as I see it. As a council, I think that we're very critical of the state government imposing on this council to provide housing for the City of Logan that's out of step ad hoc, and yet here we are looking to approve several hundred houses which are out of step with our own planning scheme. So I thank you. I have no doubt that the officers do due diligence and provide excellent reports to council, but this is simply at odds with what I believe the community expectation is, and it's at odds of what I believe we should be doing as a council. We should be protecting our green environments and fighting for them tooth and nail. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yep, Councillor.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. During the committee process, I voted against this particular motion. And the reason I did so, I sat in committee and I asked a number of questions which I didn't feel that I had adequate answers for. As a result of that, I voted against it. After the meeting, I met with officers, and I did find that my confusion stemmed from the difference between an environmental corridor and an environmental zone. And my understanding from officers is that it's clearly articulated in the maps that the environmental corridors are being protected under state and federal recommendations. They're being protected with large fences, the likes of which we haven't quite had in any developments in the past, and that the environmental zone in question is not a protected space. Now, it is a buffer zone between the industrial and the residential, but again, in my area, we have a similar issue where we have no buffer, and we're working to improve that. So I appreciate where Councillor Heremeier is coming from. In receiving the answers that I did from the officers, I will be supporting this motion today because I believe all of my questions were actually answered in relation to those environmental protections and what our obligations were under the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We keep saying that the community would deliver what the community want and the community outcry on it. As the Carver's Reach people, which is the closest development to it, have they seen the new plan that shows what the developers are doing with the embellishments and the parks and the public and the walkways? Have they seen that? Have they had a chance to give us? Well, it's Councillor Heremeier's division, but I keep hearing the community expect this, community do that. They're the closest community. What feedback have they given you? Have they seen what the developers are doing? Have they seen the changes?
Through the Mayor, the community made a number of submissions, and the officers attended site meetings with the residents at Carver's Reach and the developer. And the developer amended the application to include a landscape buffer along the southern portion of the site to Carver's Reach, and also exclude vehicular through traffic through this site. All of that material has been placed onto Council's PD hub and is publicly available for all residents to see.
So currently now that the areas, it's fenced off, public can't access it at all, can't use it. I'm just asking, there's a true there was 100-something car tyres in there, four-wheel drive trucks that's been getting used for all the wrong reasons right now?
Yeah, when the current developer purchased the site, they had to do an enormous clean-up of illegal dumping, and there was unrestricted access through the site. Since they've owned it, they've fenced it and started to preserve who gets on it. It's privately owned. There's no prospect of the community having access to it as a space to enjoy at any time in the future under the current regime. This application proposes a degree of public use and paying council ownership, which would facilitate access that doesn't exist at the moment.
Does the developer have to do all the pump track and the bigger park and all the embellishments? Do they have to do that by law, or is that something they're willing to do?
Through the Mayor, there's a draft infrastructure agreement which is attached to the draft conditions of approval. The council officers and the developer have negotiated a recommended outcome to include certain embellishments within the development over and above what would normally be required in recognition of the public benefits that could be provided by a local park area to service both the Carver's Reach estate and this new development.
But they don't have to do that?
No, these are over and above inclusions. So we haven't included them in conditions of approval because they could be challenged. We've included those as part of an infrastructure agreement which can't be legally challenged and would bind successors in title.
So if we vote this down, when we go to court over it, is there a chance that if win or lose in court. So they win in court and they can go ahead with it, they can renege on that and don't have to do any of the extra work they were going to do.
Yeah, once matters enter a planning and environment court space, there's always, they're heard anew. The grounds upon the appeal can lead to an outcome which wasn't contemplated throughout the development assessment process. So I wouldn't like to speak on behalf of the developer on how they would react or whether they would even appeal. But we have seen examples where those offers to council have been scaled back, reduced or removed throughout the course of an appeal environment.
Because that would be in the hands of the court then.
Yeah, it's something that would come out as part of the court process.
I think the biggest thing, for speaking for the people that I talk to in my division, which this isn't in obviously, but people are under the presumption that the developer can do this but the public can't. So say if just hypothetically John Smith owned the property, whoever owned it beforehand, if a private person like myself owned that property, would they have the ability to do the same thing, or is this something that only a developer has the rights to do? Because the biggest thing people say is, I can't knock down this and I can't build something on my property, but the developer can do whatever he wants. So is there any truth to that at this one? If John Smith owned the property, sorry John, if there is a John Smith, if he owns the property and he decides to do this, there's nothing stopping a normal citizen doing it, not just a developer.
That's correct. So the ownership doesn't drive the outcome, it's the planning framework and the assessment process that drives the framework. So you're correct.
Cool. That's all I've got.
Okay, we've got Councillor Raven and Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to echo Councillor Kransky's sentiment that it's great to have debate, because this is a hard decision. Councillors are elected to make hard decisions, and that often means we have different views. And so any time when you see councillors having a discussion like this, it's healthy. This is what we want in democracy. This is great to see. People having different positions. I love the questions that are being asked. They're insightful and they're relevant. So I just want to commend my colleagues, because we haven't had one of these this term before, and we've got 9 first-term councillors. So this is a really great example of council doing its job, and I want to commend everyone, but particularly the divisional councillor, for standing up for his local residents. I would be doing the exact same thing in your position, Councillor Herremeier. You've listened to their concerns and you're standing up and defending them, which is fantastic. And I'm almost jealous of you, because your position is made easier by the fact that your electors have given you a clear message and you're standing up for them, which is great. For the rest of us, we have to make a decision in the public interest, and that is never easy. That is complicated. And all of the 2 and 4s that you've heard today are fair and they're justified. My concerns is something that Councillor Bennon hit on when he asked the Director a question, which was, could we end up with a worse outcome if we refuse this today? So what happens if we refuse this? And I know my colleagues know, so this isn't to you, this is to the people at home who might be listening. So if this is refused today and the developer decides to appeal, it goes to a black and white letter of the Lord Judge, who is not accountable to the people of Logan, who does not live in our city, who does not know our community. And he doesn't hear the debate that we've had today, he or she doesn't hear that debate. They don't see the negotiations that the officers have done. They just get the application anew and they assess it in a vacuum against the law. That can often result in a worse outcome, because the things that the developer did, which I've actually never seen before. So over 50 submissions against this development, and the developer did community engagement. Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you remember a developer doing that. I don't remember one in my time. The developer did community engagement and said, what don't you like about it? Listened and added discretionary, voluntary conditions that they didn't have to do to put in that buffer. The $500,000 embellishment to the park, the concerns around only having one road in and one road out of Carver's Reach, but also being balanced against the fact that they didn't want a rat run going from Green Road through this new development down Carver's Reach, means that there's now going to be an emergency access point. So if the road out of Carver's Reach is blocked, that slider can be taken back and members of the public can still get in and out of their homes despite traffic, flood or whatever else may be happening that day. These are good outcomes for the community, but it doesn't change that they did expect to see environmental land there. And so that's why the developer had to do an ecological assessment. And what we saw in that ecological assessment, which had 3 site visits, was that the space was being used by 4-wheel drivers, which is common with land that isn't being tended to and protected, and which is why, Mr. Mayor, we purchase environmentally sensitive land so we can protect it, because when you've got an owner that doesn't protect the land, you have a situation where it can be used by anybody who decides to, and the environmental values were being degraded. So the irony is that if this developer doesn't buy the land and fence it off, do an environmental study and then get feedback from the federal and state government, that land is probably in worse condition today than if they didn't buy it at all, because those four-wheel drivers would still be accessing it, but now there's a fence to stop them. When you read the ecological report, Mr. Mayor, they saw more police chasing people than they saw wildlife moving around in the report. But that's what came up on the motion detection cameras, which shows you that the area was not being used for its good purpose, but now it will be. We vote today to approve this. They will have to protect the most sensitive areas. And the areas that aren't, that have already been degraded, but they'll be rehabilitated where there's waterways, and there'll be fencing to protect the koalas from things like dogs and people and all that sort of thing, because we've got good habitat in there, Mr. Mayor, and it's going to be protected. My last concern...
That bit.
Sorry, do I have the floor, Mr. Mayor?
Sorry, I was just going to say that you're finishing up on this because you moved the motion, and I thought you were actually going to just ask a question. So I was going to obviously leave you to last and let you do your thing, but you've just about delivered it by the sound of it. So what I will do is I will allow you to continue, and then I will ask Councillor Murphy. Oh, you don't wish to? Oh, you're fine now. Okay. All right. Well, finish up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wrapping up. You could feel that in the conclusion. My final concern is the cost. So Councillor Karansky is right. The community expects the environment to be protected, but the community also expects us to manage our budgets wisely. There is a risk, and I'm happy to pose this as a question, Mr. Mayor. There is a risk that if we go to court and we lose and our grounds aren't substantial, that adverse findings could be awarded against us. What does that mean for the residents at home? That means that ratepayers could not only be paying to fight the appeal, but could be paying for the developer's cost to get their approval up. I can't vote for that, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what that's going to cost, but I know that lawyers are expensive. I imagine $1 million is probably a pretty conservative guess. And I can't put my hand up to chase good money after bad and possibly get a worse outcome than these negotiated conditions provide. So I'll be supporting the motion today.
Thank you. Might just ask, is there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to quickly state my concerns are with the land. It's privately owned land. If you have land that has it's been zoned environmental management and conservation, you have a developer that owns this block of land, they can then go to mum and dad, state and federal, and they can go, we've had ecological reports. We haven't found anything of significance on this land. Can we now get the land rezoned? Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, there's three levels of government with 3 levels of environmental protection, federal, state and local. An applicant on an environmental site that has protected vegetation and protected species needs to apply to each layer of government. Each has an area of responsibility. It's the right process for an applicant to approach the federal and state governments first, because the endangered species and vegetation types are protected at a state and federal level. But that doesn't mean that there's not a local assessment. The local assessment that we've undertaken as officers is presented to this committee. So there is a local assessment.
So my next question is, potentially then, for those mum and dads that own 100 acres, a couple of hectares, whatever, if they have also got an environmental and conservation zone over their property, and they bought their property quite a few years ago, they've got this zoning over their land and they potentially want to develop, they can then go and get ecological studies because they've got this zoning over their land, but they know there's nothing on this land. They haven't seen anything on this land for quite some time. They can then potentially also have this list lifted and have a development come through.
Through the Mayor, I don't believe that's the case because the circumstances around this particular site are very unique. So the circumstances driving the zoning, the environmental zoning on this site, come from an outdated concept around offsets and this site as a receiving site for offsets. That fundamentally changed in 2014, where the ability for this site to receive offsets was negated, was taken away. Therefore, what we are left with on this site is an arrangement of biodiversity corridors, which are subject to the matters that Adam mentioned, that they can be refined over time based on evidence. So you've got the refinement of those corridors leaving a balance of the site, which at one point in the past attracted a zoning for a certain reason, which has now fallen away and is now available as balance of the site for development purposes. So those confluence of events and changing circumstances over time don't apply. I can't think of another site where those same things are in play across the city, because we don't treat offsets in the same way anymore. Therefore, I think that risk is not a risk.
Okay, I understand the offsets and that this was an offset site, but nothing was ever put there, which is essentially how this has actually been changed. But for the mum and dads out there that are sitting on 100, 200 acres, a lot of them in my area, they don't understand this. So essentially for me standing here today as a councillor, it sounds like it is a developer that can come through and do this because they have the money, they can do the ecological reports. My mums and dads can't do that. So for me as a councillor, I'm going to support Councillor Jeremiah and can't support this because they don't have the money. The mums and dads that have environmental management and conservation on their blocks of land can't fight this. So for me, I'm going to go against this today.
Just to respond to that, whilst I appreciate that concern, or that's not a concern in our assessment. So the bar for developing a site is the same bar for a mum and a dad as it is for a developer. So to Councillor Bannon's point earlier today, would this same outcome be available if someone else pursued on the site? That it would. We don't control the costs associated with consulting work and that journey that they go on, but it is available to all. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, councillors, just to finish up on this, yep, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Leading off from what Councillor Wilcox was saying about mum and dad investors, it's a story you hear all the time. Mum and dad do a little bit of investigation for their property because they're thinking about putting it on the market. They find out they have an environmental or a biodiversity corridor on the property, and all of a sudden the developer who's thinking about purchasing their property says, well, you need to sell your property at the bottom price because you've got so many overlays, there's only so much of the property that we can use. And then later on, they go through the federal and state governments and they work out a way to put more properties on the property than what they originally said to the owners of the property. So it's a very sad situation when that happens, and it happens over and over and over again. So I think this is a perfect example for property owners in Logan that have large acreage properties with environmental land to be very vigilant about those offers that you get from developers. Do your own investigations, investigate it thoroughly. This is a difficult thing to decide on because it's like this. We as councillors and as Logan City Council usually end up becoming the last line of defence for environment. It slips through the cracks of federal, it'll slip through the cracks of state, and then it comes to us. And we get given a decision on whether or not to fight for the environment or to just lie on our backs and let it steamroll over us. Now, we can choose to fight, and if we do choose to fight, it's likely that we will lose. That's the reality of this. My question for the officers is have we already lost this battle if we fight it? Is there just so much evidence there for you that if we choose to fight, which I think is the right thing to do, is this a battle that we've already lost? That is my question.
Through the Mayor, my response to that would be, I think language around assessment or environmental outcomes slipping through the gaps at a state and federal level aren't helpful and nor do I believe they to be the case in this assessment. This application was lodged in 2019, and Council's assessment of it essentially started in sort of late 2021 because there was so much rigour around those levels of assessment. So I don't support those statements. In respect to is the battle lost, the recommendation you see on the board is officers' opinion. So our opinion is that the negotiations that have been held have secured a great outcome for the community. They go to the highest levels of the scheme and beyond to secure that outcome, yes. And in terms of the reasonable expectations of those adjoining residents, I completely understand the sentiment expressed in this room today. Our response as officers has been to attach conditions to that approval to mitigate those impacts and to satisfy those expectations as much as we can. So the recommendation in front of you is the best foot forward of officers on this application.
So colleagues, there you have it. We can fight this, but it's a fight we're going to lose, either way. Initially, I supported Councillor Heremiah, and I think that our environment actually is worth fighting for. Because how much money are we putting in to environmental programs? How much money are we putting in to being carbon neutral? What is all that worth if we're going to give away environmental land? If we're just going to give up? Every time there's a battle, we just give up. We need to fight for it. We need to fight for what we have, because if we don't, there's no more of it. We have other PDA areas. We have met our density targets time and time again. We're one of the only cities in Queensland that does it. And yet we have to give up. Do we really have to give up important environmental land? I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Just to finish up, okay, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be quick. Important environmental land. I would like to just ask the officers, we're talking important environmental land, like this is very significant, like we're talking about the Daintree here. Could I please just clarify what sort of environmental significance does this land hold? Like I'm hearing and I'm seeing images of significant dumped rubbish and and waste. Could I please just question that?
Yeah, through the Mayor, the parts of the site that are intended to be protected are very significant, federally significant, state significant. The dumping, as you referred to, that was on the site extended across all of the site. So over time, we would expect that would increase, and those significant values of those parts of the site to be protected would be further reduced and potentially reduced into oblivion. So the planning outcomes proposed here do the job of protecting the most significant parts of the site. And as we've explained in the report and in our discussion, the refinement of the corridor and what that leaves behind and available for development, those parts of the site are the same local values that we see across the remainder of our growth areas, and they can be resolved through the payment of offsets, and they're available for clearing, much as this site is not unique in that regard. So the important stuff has been absolutely protected, and the rest is available to be put to the use as recommended by officers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some concluding remarks regarding this development application. We've heard the word refinement of different environmental factors, but what it also is a reduction if you look at the maps. So refinement is also a reduction. I'd like to make that very clear. On top of that, we've heard statements regarding peer reviewing different different sort of studies, and what the community understands is the peer review process. The community's smart. It doesn't need a simplified explanation of what a peer review is. What the community needs is their council to stand up for them. This is councillally zoned environmental land. This is an opportunity for council to stand with the nearby residents and say, enough is enough, fair is fair, this isn't the right thing to do. And I hope we might make the right decision today. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hiremaier. Okay, so we've had lots of discussion. As I was going to say, during the process between the committee and this meeting, I asked the officers to ground troop the piece of land and just to convey whether or not it's in line with what the federal and state report indicates, and which that has come back to me to suggest that that's actually the case. So obviously this is a very hard committee report because there are so many factors in it, and I understand both sides of the argument, and I think this is one of those ones we've probably had the most discussion in this committee. So we've got a mover and we've got a seconder, so now we have to put it to the vote. As you can see, the recommendations up on the board. I will now put it to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That has been carried. I will now ask, and I will go around the floor to see how you voted for the record. So I will go through the whole process, so each councillor will get a say. Councillor Lane.
For.
Councillor Russell.
For.
Councillor Karansky.
Resoundingly against.
Councillor Raven.
For.
Councillor Hall.
Against.
Councillor Fraser.
For.
Councillor Hiremaier.
Against.
Councillor
For.
Bannon. Councillor Stemp.
For.
Councillor Wilcox.
Against.
Councillor Murphy.
For. Thank you for the debate.
And Councillor Power for. Thank you. Okay. We'll keep moving on. That was a tough one. And you can clearly see both sides. Okay. We'll now go to that. Finishes Councillor Raven's committee. We'll now go to City Infrastructure. I now refer to the City Infrastructure Committee meeting held on the 14th of February 2023. Councillor Lane, Chairperson of the City Infrastructure Committee, you may proceed.
That's Chairperson of the mighty Infrastructure Committee meeting, Mr Mayor. We had 3 items on the agenda during this meeting. The Capital Roadworks and Drainage Program quarterly report, which clearly shows that despite some really terrible weather, that council is actually getting on and delivering local services for local residents. It was a fantastic report, and it showed that our infrastructure crew are actually getting out there and getting things happening. There was a petition for the Bethania to Bow Desert Rail Trail that was received into the committee, and the closure of a road reserve in Estramina Road at Regents Park, which was a bit of a footpath that's actually getting closed. So that's about the abundance of it, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Do any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Karansky.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wanted to speak to the petition in relation to the Bethania and Logan Village Rail Trail, and we certainly debated that issue at length in committee, so I won't relitigate any of that. But what I did want to just reassure the community that community feedback really has been an essential part of this project and factors into the scoping and design of the proposed rail trail. And I sincerely appreciate the high level of engagement the project has received from the community. The community engagement that we undertook between September and October was invaluable in helping council understand how the community would use the trail and the matters that were important in consideration of the design. And while the community sentiment was overwhelmingly positive for the rail trail, I do acknowledge that some members of the division have voiced their concerns regarding privacy and security. I want to assure residents that I'm working proactively with council officers to ensure that all the feedback I've received has been provided to council's design team and is being factored in and considered as part of the design process, which is currently underway. The design stage of the project is essential, and we need to give this process the time required to undertake this important work to achieve an optimum outcome that will find solutions and meet requirements from residents for the best outcome. I want to thank the residents of Bethania and Waterford Palm Lake Resorts for their invitation for me to meet with residents, and I've made an assurance that I will meet with residents following completion of the draft design, and I believe, Mr Mayor, you've also given residents that undertaking as well. I look forward to reporting back to residents when the draft design is ready, and we will share it with the broader community also. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Any other councillors wish to speak? No. Councillor Lane?
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. I now move that the minutes of the City Infrastructure Committee meeting held on the 14th of February 2023 be confirmed, and that the recommendations of the City Infrastructure Committee meeting held on the 14th of February 2023 be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Lane has moved the motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fraser has seconded. Anyone wish to speak to the motion? No. I now put it to the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is being carried unanimously. Does any council wish to speak? Record their name against any of the items in that report? No. Thank you. And if you're just wondering why I didn't ask that in the first committee, it was because everyone voted unanimously for the first report, and in the second report we recorded the names anyway. So just so you notice that I didn't forget. Thank you. Okay, so we've now got City Lifestyle Committee. I now refer to the City Lifestyle Committee meeting held on the 15th of February 2023. Councillor Kransky, Chairperson of the City Lifestyle Committee, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I take this opportunity to speak to the recommendations. At the City Lifestyle Committee last week, councillors received an annual progress update on the Safe City Strategy and Action Plan 21 to 25, which provides a strategic framework for the coordination of community safety initiatives. The update provided insight into the plans and objectives undertaken as part of the strategy delivery across the city. A further update followed with a report on the community infrastructure progress from October to December 2022. I know this is always a favourite among councillors to find out how various projects are progressing across the city. The consolidated update provided council with insight into the progress of sport and community infrastructure projects, and the good news is that we're powering ahead. Council supported the draft Logan City Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy from 2023 to 2027, and this draft strategy reflects Council's commitment to arts, culture and heritage, defining key aims and actions that will guide the services, events and facilities across the term and meet and respond to community needs and aspirations. I'm really excited about this body of work. They do a great service to our community, and I'm looking forward to seeing the strategy implemented and benefiting the community into the future. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Any other councillors wish to speak on any of these items? No? Back to you, Councillor Kransky.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I now move that the minutes of the City Lifestyle Committee meeting held on the 15th of February be confirmed, and that the recommendations of the City Lifestyle Committee meeting held on the 15th of February be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Councillor Kransky has moved the motion. Councillor Hall seconding the motion. Anyone wish to speak to the motion? Put their hands up for those in favour of the motion. That has been carried unanimously, therefore the motion has been carried. Does anyone wish to record the name of any of the items? No? Okay, thank you. We'll get moving. And we'll get to the last committee, which is the City Governance Committee. I now refer to the City Governance Committee meeting held on the 15th of February 2023. Councillor Murphy, Chairperson of the City Governance Committee. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and welcome to today. We had a very busy round, and I'd like to speak to one report in particular, 6.2, which is the 2022-2023 local infrastructure projects. Under a new policy guidelines, Council will now see monthly reports being tabled for approval of our local infrastructure programs from across the 12 divisions of Logan. The purpose of this program is to provide the ability to respond and implement divisional-based projects that address specific needs for each division. This report is an important step to give our ratepayers, residents and community awareness of projects that are happening throughout the city. So you'll see this report being tabled every month for approval. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I hand it back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Do any other councillors wish to discuss any of the items on that committee? No? Back to you, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I now would like to move, number 1, that the minutes of the City Governance Committee held on the 15th of February 2023 be confirmed, and number 2, that the recommendations of the City Governance Committee held on the 15th of February 2023 be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Murphy has moved the motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stemp has seconded the motion. Anyone wish to speak to the motion? No? Okay, can you put your hands up for those who are supporting the motion? That has been carried unanimously, therefore the motion has been carried. Anyone wish to record their name against any of the items in that report? Councillor Karansky.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The local infrastructure program budget, which is actually reflecting DISIP, I think I have the wrong report number here, and I was just trying to find the correct number. But with regard to the DISIP, I've got item 6.2, but I think I'm incorrect. 6.1. Thank you, Councillor. I'd just like to abstain if I could, please.
Okay, that will be recorded. Thank you.
You.
Okay, councillors, that's the end of our committee reports. We now go to council reports. There being no council reports to consider, there's also no late reports to consider. Do any councillors have any petition to present? Now, I will ask councillors in this area from now on, what we'll be doing is asking for petitions, but I'll also ask if anyone wishes to convey any information in relation to any petition. No? Okay. Consideration of notified motions. We have no notified motions to consider. We have general business, and where do we start? Doesn't say. So do we remember where we started last time? Councillor Hare, did we? No? Okay, we'll go to Councillor Bannon. Councillor Stemp. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In January, I received a works notification and traffic management plans for some works that were about to occur in Flagstone and a little bit into Jimboomba. And I had concerns on potential impacts on residents and motorists. I would like a massive thanks through Mr Trinker to go to Logan Water, please. They have done an outstanding job. They actually met me out on site with Peter Waugh, the officer in charge of police out there, because he had concerns as well. They worked with both of us. They took on board all the feedback, everything, and I haven't seen any real impacts on the traffic, the motorists, the residents. They're working off the road, they're on the shoulders, they've kept me up to date the whole way. They've letterbox dropped people to let them know that there would be works occurring, but there have been no significant impacts at all on any of the motorists or any of the traffic flowing through there, especially at school time. So I would just like a huge thanks sent to Logan Water and the crews that met me out on site, had a chat with us, and we relayed all of our concerns, and they were all taken on board, and they worked through all of them. So thank you very much.
Councillor Murphy. Councillor Lane.
Up for a good chat. Mr Mayor, last week I had the privilege of attending Area 51. Area 51 hosted a young man by the name of Matteo Eggleton, and Matteo was celebrating his 6th birthday. Matteo, for the last 3 years, has fought a very aggressive form of cancer, and he was prepping to undergo some more bone marrow transplant and medication treatment, which for his mum, they don't know whether he'll survive that process. Now, Matteo was, his dream was to go to Area 51, and Jason Wang, the owner of Area 51, just opened the doors and said, invite as many people as you need to, let's go party and let's have fun. We had firemen there. He got to wear his little miniature fire outfit. We had police officers. We had the Governor, Jeanette Young, send her best wishes. When she was the Chief Health Officer, she worked closely with the Eggleton family on Matteo's treatment. We had Captain America, Superwoman, but most importantly, we had my great friend Batman arrive. And the look on young Matteo's face when Batman came up with his low little voice going, "I'm Batman," and he just looked at him with absolute awe. And I said to Matteo, how about you go show Batman to your friends? And it was the best thing that you could have seen. Batman went onto the trampoline with Matteo and his friends and jumped all over the trampoline and spent a lot of time there. Many thanks to Jason Wang and the crew from Area 51. They did a wonderful thing for a little boy from Upper Coomera. to make his wishes come true. And I wish all the best to Matteo and his family as he goes through the process of the bone marrow transplant and the treatments. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Russell, Councillor Karansky. I just want to clarify before we get up, when I spoke about the petitions, because I know you're going to speak about a petition. If a petition hasn't been properly made, you still have the opportunity to talk about it. That's what I was referring to. So go ahead, Councillor Karansky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and you are right. I am going to speak to a petition today, but it's not a petition to Logan City Council. The petition relates to the residents of Yarra Bilbera and adjoining suburbs calling on a post office. So as an area councillor, I get asked probably in this order for three things that in Yarra Bilbera. The first one is a pool, and I believe that that will be happening in due course. The second thing is, when is Westfields coming to Yarra Bilbera? And the third one is, when are we getting a post office? Now, I do know that it's incredibly difficult to actually establish a post office, but we are now an area that has a mass of over 11,000 residents, and we've got a whole land release that's just all raring to go. Not to mention, the poor residents of Logan Village have been crying out for a post office since the dawn of time, because they actually had one which was taken from them. So the point I wanted to raise today is we have 800 signatures on a petition which is actually Terry White Chemist, and poor Terry White Chemists are actually acting as an agency at the moment. So when you walk in the front doors, there's parcels floor to ceiling that residents have to weave between to actually get their chemist services, and they are saying themselves that they don't have the staff or the expertise to be able to continue in the agency as it is currently, and I'm fearful if we were to lose that service entirely. So with that being said, Mr. Mayor, I have actually foreshadowed a recommendation, and I'm hoping that I've already written, and I'm hoping that you will write to the Federal Member for Right, the Honourable Scott Buchholz, in support of the proposal by residents of Yarra Bilbera and adjacent suburbs to fast-track the opening of a full-service post office in Yarra Bilbera. At the moment, to get to a post office is at least a 20-minute trek for local residents, so all help would be gratefully received.
Thank you. So you've moved that motion, Councillor Karansky?
Yes, please.
I have a seconder for that motion. Councillor Lane has a second. No, you're not seconding. You're raising a question. Proceed.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. In the wording of the motion, it says for Scott Buchholz, in support of the proposal by residents of Yarra Bilbera and adjacent suburbs to fast-track the opening of a full post office in Yarra Bilbera. It is not Mr. Buchholz's purview to actually do that. Australia Post is obviously its own entity within government and makes its own decisions. It can't be directed by government in these circumstances, so I'm just worried that the wording in this motion will actually put Mr. Buchholz in a position that he's probably not able to do anything and could impact him.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually sought advice on the wording of this particular motion. It's, I'm happy for the officers to chime in at any point, but the intent is to ask for your advocacy on behalf of the Yarra Bilbera residents to the federal member, and if independently, should you like, also to Australia Post.
So do you want to change the wording on that, or are we happy with the wording? So
the wording was provided by the
fine.
advocacy team, as far as I understand.
Okay. So I've been told by the CEO the wording's fine. Councillor Wilcox?
Sorry, just got a quick question. It says in adjacent suburbs to fast track the opening. Does that mean there's actually already one on the cards to come, if we're asking them to fast track it?
Yarra Bilbera would be a suburb of 50,000 residents, so without having knowledge, I anticipate there will be a post office in the fullness of time, but that time frame is unknown to me.
Any other questions? No? Can we have a seconder to the motion? Councillor Raven, a second to the motion. I put the matter to the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That is being not carried unanimously, except for Councillor Lane. How do you vote?
I'll abstain, Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Hiromai?
Abstain.
Okay, and I voted for it. Okay, that is our petitions. Sorry, that's our general business. You got any more general business? Councillor Karansky.
Nothing more for me, thank you.
Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to echo Councillor Lane's sentiment around the fantastic effort by Area 51 with Mateo's birthday, but also give a huge shout out to Brisbane Character Hire. They are, despite their name being a bit of a misnomer and talking about North Logan, they're actually based in Browns Plains. And I personally know some of their staff reached out to me and said, hey, we all volunteered our time. A lot of us put our own money into supporting it. So it's been, like, Area 51 did a great job to host, but it's been really a whole of business effort from all the community, different businesses in Logan that could wrap around and support him where they got the opportunity. So huge shout out to the great local businesses we have that love to support people in need, and they've done so here.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Councillor Hall. Councillor Fraser. I'll give you one more opportunity because I know you were caught on the hop, Councillor Hiramoy. You're fine? Okay. All right, councillors, well, that's the end of the meeting. I now conclude this agenda for today's meeting. I now declare the meeting finished at 11:15 a.m. Thank you.